All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming and seeing our video. This is the video series for Belcastro Literary Agency, although I have a couple agents today from different agencies, so we get a lot of fun perspectives and different kinds of stuff like that. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves. Ava, why don't you go first?
Hi, I'm Ava Scalzo. I am a literary agent at Spielberg Literary, and I represent adult fiction, romance and science fiction and fantasy, young adult fiction, and select middle grade fiction.
And Anne?
I missed the question because I had a client literally calling me right as we started. And so I'm like frantically texting, like, I have to call you back. I'm sorry.
Go ahead and just introduce yourself.
Okay. Well, I'm Anne Rose, and I am with Prospect Agency, and my clients are calling me right now as we speak. So
Well, there's always something pops up.
How is it?
But that's kind of a great segue into talking about what our chat is about today, which is basically agent expectations. What an agent can actually do for you and what some writers assume we can do for you. That is like actually not feasible, even in the slightest. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through some questions that you guys actually submitted to us. And then we'll do a few that we have added ourselves, and we will chat. And so after you've watched this, you can go ahead and put comments. If you think of more things to ask or things we didn't cover, put it in the comments. We'll go ahead and respond, or maybe there'll be a follow-up video for all the stuff that we maybe didn't get to. So right now we are going to go into our questions. All right. So the first thing a lot of writers seem to think is that once they get their agent, the submission process to editors is going to be like super fast. They're like, okay, I waited forever to get an agent. It took all this time. What are the actualities, do you think, when we go on submission to editors to warn clients of before we start that process?
I mean, I think during the call, it's one of those things that should be established for, one of those questions that authors should ask an agent is like, what's your timeline view of this? Because it depends on the manuscript. Like certainly some manuscripts come in and you're like, well, this just needs some light editorial work and I'm ready to go. But then there are others that, you're like, oh, well, this still needs some revisions. And sometimes it's not until you're in the revisions that you realize how much work that's going to take. And then there's that like extended back and forth. And then, it's also like, it depends on the kind of agent you have. Like, I think the three of us are all pretty editorial in our focus. So there's always going to be some time lapse where we're working on the manuscript before we're submitting it to publishers. But there are definitely agents out there who don't do that.
Definitely. Anne, what about you?
I agree with everything that Ava said. The way I interpreted that question, though, was more along the lines of like expectations once it leaves our inboxes. And so I think that that's also something else to kind of think about. Like editors are just as swamped as we are these days, if not even more so, with all of their expectations that they have to do. So once it hits their box, they aren't immediately reading your submission and making a decision on it right then and there. Usually it sits there and it gets filed into some sort of like to be read pile, I'm sure, and gotten to when they have the chance to go through their submissions. So sometimes that can take weeks, sometimes it can take months. I've sold a manuscript that took almost 2 years before it sold. So it is what it is out there right now. So
yeah, definitely an important thing to know is that like we can't control once we send it what happens really. When we'll touch on that a little more later. I know we have some other questions that are pertaining to it. But it's definitely something I think authors don't realize. One of my own authors, like we just accepted an offer from a publisher and she's like, okay, so we signed now? I'm like, oh, sweet summer child. And she's now realizing in the industry, like, even if you do get that offer and it happens and you accept the offer and everything, it's still going to be slow after that. The contracts can take over a month or more. And then you have to negotiate the contract. And so there's a huge waiting game aside from just getting your agent and then putting it on submission. So the realistic side of things is that it's not a fast track. It's not a sprint. You're still going to be waiting a while. And then obviously, once you do sign your contract, you're still not going to get published for at least a year, most likely, because you're in a market.
Yeah. And even that, like there's some cases where you have editors who can slot it right into their editorial queue immediately. And then other cases where you don't necessarily know exactly. I mean, especially for projects where you're being acquired for seasons that are pretty far out. So if, editors are signing, some editors are still signing 2023 projects, but most of them are already looking at 2024. And the further out you are, the more likely is, okay, you agree on an offer. Maybe you're still waiting even on a contract, but you're also going to wait a long time for those edits from the editor.
There's a lot of waiting. Remember that. And don't get mad at your agent when it takes a while for things to happen like that. So the next one is, I think there's a different answer for a lot of different people. So I wanted to address it here since we have, a different smattering of agents. The level of critique agents often give their clients, are they going to read everything the client writes and give feedback on it? Or are they only going to look at select things? What is the process there that they can come to expect?
So I could jump in here. So for me, it depends on a couple of things. So for books that are contracted, so like we signed the first book, like we worked on, we edited, we submitted, it got an offer, and it was a multi-book deal. So for those second and third or whatever number of books of that project, I might read them beforehand, but I am not going to send a full-on edit. The editor's going to do that role. I read it just so that I know. I mean, sometimes I'll read it and I might say to the author, like, oh, I don't know about this one thing, but like, it's really, and that's only if we have time. Because if you're drafting up to deadline, then I'm just like, just send it to the editor. I don't need to see it. That's the role that they're going to play. But so it's only really things that I'm going to be sending out widely on submission that I am going to review things for. I have a couple authors who've done things like reader magnets, like written little novellas, or, and that's stuff that they handle with their CPs or, their beta readers, and not via me. It's not really something that I think is worth my time to invest in. And it's not, unless they really wanted me. I mean, I'm like happy to read it, but I'm not going to like edit it.
Anne?
Yeah, I agree. I think we have to prioritize projects that we can actually take out on submission and that we can actually sell. So if it's a project like what Ava was saying about, a novella that they want to put out there as a reader magnet, like that's not really, it's great for them and their marketing and their brand, but at the same rate, it's not something that is really beneficial to what we're trying to do for them. So it's really about time and bandwidth at that point. And we really have to prioritize those projects that are things that we can go out there and try to get in front of editors. So exactly. Now for me, I have some clients who will come to me with like 10 ideas and like full synopsises of 10 ideas and be like, which one should I do now? And that's good.
I love that. That's my favorite.
And so, I'll go through them and I'll try to help them like prioritize and try to see like which projects I could see like coming up and being the most marketable. But I think it also kind of varies too per author, because this particular author that I'm talking about is pretty quick. And so when they come with the project, usually a couple months later is like the full manuscript. So this is not something that we are chasing down for years and years and years. So that's a little bit different than maybe someone who's like a slower drafter. And then we have to think more about longevity and, when this project's going to come out and those kinds of things. So I do read a lot of things that we don't end up doing much with, but I think in the long run, it's beneficial to us both to kind of get an idea of like where they're at, where the market's at, and like how to prioritize.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. That we're going to look at your pitches and potential like partials or whatever to see how you're doing with it. But at the end of the day, it has to be something we feel we can sell, or at least that we're passionate enough to try to sell. I have had clients who've given me pitches. My favorite is the pitch list, where they give me a list of pitches and I'm like, give me a synopsis on that one. Go. So we do look through those, and there are some where we'll be like, look, this isn't marketable right now. Like, this is not going to be something I can sell, especially by the time we get it written. So it really does depend. And like Ava said, if you're on deadline, I'm definitely not going to waste time going over your stuff. If you have a contract already, I will maybe read it through once so I know what's going on. I can see any glaring errors. After that, it's you and your editor. I'm not going to like sit there and go over the copy edits with you that your editor sent over or stuff like that. We don't have time. We just don't have time. And if my client wants to do something outside of like the agenting section, like one of my clients does a book on poetry every now and then, I don't look at that. I don't rep poetry for one. But again, it's not something that's going to contribute to me selling it. So I don't have time to put that in there. So it's, and there are times where an agent will read your stuff and finally just be like, this is not something I can sell. And that's kind of when you have a discussion on, do you write something else? Are you guys still a compatible team? That's when all of those conversations kind of crop up and you want to understand where you guys sit with each other. So again, it's a lot about time management for us. That's the core of it. So we're not going to offer you feedback on every single thing you write. We're not going to rep every single thing. Well, not rep. That's a different question, but still. So that kind of ties into the next question, actually, about will an agent shop every manuscript I write? They will if they think it is something they can sell. Like, if we think we can edit this and work with you on it and get it in front of editors and hopefully sell it, then yes. If it's something we don't think that stuff about, then no, we're not going to waste your time or my time. Our time. Your time or our time. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that one.
No, I mean, I think that's pretty much it. You know, every project is a discussion, and, you know, ideally, one of the things that when they send us blurbs and pitches, this is like, if you doing that beforehand is extremely valuable, because we can weed out projects that might be problematic down the line, because no one is excited to tell their client, oh yeah, I'm not going out on submission with this. Like, that is not ever our ultimate goal. And, you know, and so it's really important for authors to see us as someone who can help advise them on where to, you know, and it's not about telling someone what to write. It's not about dictating their creative processes. It's really about looking at giving them advice on like the current marketplace. Like, if you really want to work on this project, that's okay, but know in advance that this might not work out.
I think that's really what's important part of this conversation, is that at the end of the day, as much as writing is an art form and all of that, it's publishing is a business, and the book is the product. And so we have to be able to sell a product to our customers, who are the editors, who therefore want to be able to sell their product to their customers, which is the bookstore, not necessarily the reader. So we have to take all of those things into consideration. And so market trends, what's out there, what's not, what's working, what isn't, all of those things are always going to come into play.
Yeah. Exactly. So the next one is I feel like it's gonna be short and sweet, but taxes. Yeah, some authors think the agent is going to help them with their taxes when they become a published author and all that. And Anne, what is your response to that?
I mean, I have a calculator app on my phone, but I'm not sure that's going to do anyone any good. So I did not take accounting. I do not have a degree in accounting. So I would suggest get an accountant.
Yes. I would say that is the only answer here, is really you need I mean, unless you sign with an agent who also has an accounting degree and specializes in tax preparation,
tax law.
I would probably avoid having your agent do anything with taxes. Most of us have English degrees or marketing degrees, like that, not really compatible with taxes.
I mean, you wouldn't expect your accountant to sell your novel, so I'm not sure why we should expect the person selling the novel to do the taxes.
Yeah, especially because agent taxes are very different than author taxes. So what we have to do is not going to be the same thing you're going to have to do. So it's definitely best to get an accountant. If you're going to be an author, most likely you're going to get an accountant, or you're going to like go to H&R Block and be like, yo, explain. What do I need? And if you're at a conference or anything like that, attend a talk on taxes. They do teach them sometimes. I sat in on one a little while ago for freelance. It can help at least get you started. But your agent's not going to be helping you on your taxes. Please be aware of that. We are responsible, obviously, for sending you some of your paperwork when you're earning and all of that. We will be sending that, but we're not going to be able to tell you how to do your taxes. It's just, no, I can't do that for regular people. All right. So there are huge misconceptions about what an agent actually does, like in general, so I wanted to have one break where we kind of just talked about our usual day-to-day, like what the tasks we most frequently feel like we are following, and maybe how we kind of time manage stuff like that. So Ava, you want to go first?
Sure. So, I mean, most of the day I spend it's online, right? So I'm in my email and I'm on, I'm either editing something, or I'm actively reading, or I'm going through queries. I'm generally, so I'm usually responding to emails, unless I have a day where I've set aside, like I'm sending out a project, in which case I have it's like that's a big day, and I'm setting up all these emails. I tend to schedule my submission emails. So I prep them all, I get it all set up, and then I put it in a folder to be sent later so I can review and make sure that I didn't screw up salutations, and I actually attached the manuscripts and things like that. I still make up, I'm human, make mistakes sometimes, but do my best to avoid them. I love the schedule send feature. I think it's a wonderful advancement in technology. But really, it's just a lot of email. I mean, I communicate with my clients so many different ways. So I have clients who email, I have clients who text, I have clients who DM. So I'm usually I'm often on Twitter, because I do actually have correspondence with clients via that particular social media app. I'm also on Instagram. So, it's just managing all the socials and all the different ways that people will contact and reach out to me. I schedule editor calls, so I, continue to network and stay in touch with people. A lot of that, I actually use my any pass email I get. So if I get a pass from an editor on a project, I always try to turn that into an editorial call, just because I think that's it's an easy way to to do that. And it's a great way to build up those editorial relationships. So, it's like client management, and then also that sort of networking piece is just a big function of the job. And then, sitting down and actually editing the manuscripts.
And Anne, what about you?
My day's very similar, right? I'm sure all of ours are very similar. I have my email open all the time. So my response rate in emails is really quick. Every single morning I wake up and read query letters every single morning. So I'm usually trying to clear out my box every single day. So I'm as close to that 0 number that we're all striving for, but it never really quite makes it, because I do end up with maybes, and then they kind of just hang out there for a little while, and I'm not really sure, and then I'll go back, and then so it wouldn't be wild for you to send me a query letter at 12 o'clock at night on a Tuesday, and for me to on Wednesday morning send you either asking for it or rejecting it, or maybe not hearing from me at all, actually, because it could be a maybe. But that's part of how I like to do my business, right? So I like to get those queries under control. It's it feels like the one thing I maybe have control over, and that's probably very naive of me to even think that I have that. But then it's lots of making calls, having calls with clients. You just saw, I got a call right as we started. Like, my clients know that they can reach out to me whenever they need me. So I'm pretty much on call all day, every day, to whatever it is that they could possibly need to talk about or work through or anything. And also, like Ava, I'm on Twitter. I have a whole thread. My clients are all on a thread together, and they are constantly talking to each other, which I think is hysterical, and I love it. But I also like to kind of keep an eye on it and just see, like, what are we talking about? What are we doing? You know, and help out if I ever need to. So yeah, that's pretty much the same thing, though.
Yeah, I love that we have sections for our clients, because I have a Slack that all of my clients are on too. And they have like little side things of like works in progress, and they can talk about their stuff right there. And I love that stuff. But yeah, similarly, I have all of my emails open. I have all my emails on my phone. I also have my second job for freelancing. So like I use my mornings to get my freelance projects done and send emails for both sides, obviously, because morning is a good time in publishing to send emails. And then, yeah, like on any given day, we could be either doing the query box, we could be editing a contract, we could be setting up phone calls and video chats with editors or clients, basically. We can be editing, we can be reading, so much stuff, building submission lists. So a lot of our day-to-day is not reading. It's like the nitty-gritty stuff. It's the same for editors. It's a lot of our day-to-day isn't reading. That's on our off time, where we're sitting on the couch and like our partner's watching TV. God, you go in the query box every morning?
Every morning.
Ugh, I should do that. I usually have like
right now I have 2 query boxes. So
yes, you do. Because it doesn't like you. I try to make one evening my like query box strictly evening, so I can just like really like go through it and focus. Doesn't always happen.
Yeah, I tend to do queries at bedtime. So I lie down with my 7-year-old, and so I have to like my best way to get her to fall asleep is to actually ignore her. So like I just lay there, and then I just like tend to go through queries at that moment in time. It's great because it's like time that I'm not doing anything else. So and I have to be quiet. So
see, we all have our coping mechanisms.
I talk to my query box, so that's interesting that you can be quiet. Like I have like this conversation with it, and I don't know. Maybe I need more coworkers.
I don't talk to it, but I give it looks.
I mean, it gets looks. You know the looks my query box gets, Anne.
All right. So next question is basically, do agents secure speaking engagements or conference invites? And apparently some authors think you can do this before you've even gotten a published book, which I don't know why you would speak or go to a conference as a speaker if you don't have a published book, unless you're going to like teach based on your degree or something like that.
I think it only applies to nonfiction. Like for fiction, it doesn't. So like one of the agents at our agency, she does handle speaking engagements for her clients, but she only handles nonfiction. This agent has a publicity background, and the client herself is just very active and is like called on for lots of like college engagements, and they're paid. There's a paid component to those things, and they have like a whole form and all of that. I would never do that for my clients. I only handle fiction. There's like generally if there's anything happening with speaking engagements, it's with the publisher and the publisher's publicity department. That has nothing to do with me.
Ditto.
I know. I was like, I don't have anything to add to that. Basically, yeah, that's pretty much it. The publisher's going to mostly be doing that.
Yeah. See, the only place where that might even ever come up is probably nonfiction. But the nonfiction, it's such a different, like there's that whole platform that you have to have and all this other stuff. And so I guess that's part of what would make you an appealing nonfiction author. But I don't know anything about that since I specifically do not do nonfiction.
Nope, no, thank you. I lost my place. Hold on. The cover. Do agents control any aspects of this? Because a lot of authors think we have a lot more control than we do. And what about you?
I mean, that would be cool if we did, but no, generally speaking, the publisher wants to control that. And I mean, in all reality, like they should, that's their job. They know, they should know the market. They should know who they are trying to get as a reader. And so we should at some point, like, allow them to do that job. So while you might have strong opinions about it, and we can push back if we think there's something problematic and those kinds of things, if the character on the cover is not at all the character that they've written in the book, and I mean, there's certain things that we can do, but at the end of the day, the publisher has the final say in what's going to end up on the shelf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the only time I ever really get involved is if the author has a very strong opinion and they're too emotional to convey that opinion. So, because most of the time I'm fine letting my authors lead that, it's part of their development as an author is developing those roles with the publisher, with their editor. So I don't necessarily like to always step in, but sometimes it's appropriate and necessary. And covers are one of those like lightning rod issues that, sometimes it just makes sense for, an agent to sort of say, okay, well, like we're going to be the neutral party and just sort of lay out the author's concerns and hopefully, in a way that allows the publisher to gracefully accept them.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely describe it to my clients as like, I'm supposed to be the bad guy. They're not supposed to put themselves in the line of fire. So like,
yeah,
if there is something I see that's really problematic, like, a person of color on the book when it's not a person of color as a main character, or if the cover looks like almost identical to something else that's been published already, I will talk to the author first and then I'll let them know what I'm going to tell the publisher. But we really don't have a decision. We can, I like a lot of publishers do ask for the author's input. Like, what color schemes do you like? What book covers do you like? What illustrators or whatever do you find yourself gravitating toward? So you can suggest things, but we're not going to be able to be like, this designer is going to do your cover and they're going to be okay with that. Like we can't do anything like that, unfortunately.
And sometimes it's a battle we cannot win.
Yeah. Right.
And that's just the reality of it. Even if they're terrible, terrible, terrible covers that the author doesn't like. And maybe they're not terrible for like on a design aspect, but just feel terrible for the book itself that the author has written. Like even sometimes we just nothing we can do.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, publishers don't want you to hate your cover, but they're going to do the cover in the way that they see it as beneficial to selling. So yeah, we can't do anything about that. Similarly, do we have any control over what format they publish in? So mass market, hardcover, paperback, are they going to go digital first? Do agents really have any say in that kind of stuff? Go ahead.
My take is not really. So, I mean, I've had books where the original intent was, trade paperback, and then they decided to change it to hardcover. And then I've had the vice versa happen. They were originally it was, intended for hardcover, and they're going to change it to trade paperback. They give us a heads up, but it's not actually asking for approval. They're going to do what they're going to do. Usually what sort of from the deal memo or from the contract, what they're planning to do with the book. So you have a sense from those initial conversations with the editor what the publisher's plans are, but we don't dictate those plans. We don't send a project out on submission and say, we think this should be your next featured hardcover. That is not how that works. That's something that's decided, and it's when they make the offer, they have whatever they've based their P&L off of. That's really what's going to dictate what format you end up in. And, that you kind of you get what you get.
And like you said, sometimes they can change it.
Yep.
So I mean, even if you get signed for specific things, sometimes they'll be like, but I think we're going to do this instead. So
yeah, like as an agent, when we get the contract and that, we work on them putting in the different formats, but they're not going to put any promises in. We will be publishing this in hardcover. No, they're going to say what percentages you'll earn if we publish it in hardcover. Mm-hmm. So you're very rarely going to find that an agent can push that.
Yeah.
Just got to go with what the contract is. We get in that contract. Will the agent market my self-published book for me, or will they sell my self-published book to editors? Anne, why don't you go first?
No. No. I think that we are looking to sell a product. And so if your product is already out there for sale, then that it's done. Like you've already, that the job is done. So it's really, really hard to get a publisher interested in a project that's already been published. You've already set a precedent for how well that product could do in the market. So, and if it's not doing well, then why would they want to take it on for them to not do well with it? So if it's something that you know that you want masses and masses of people to be able to see, and traditional publishing is exactly where you want it to be, then don't publish it yourself first. Don't put it on websites for free, fully for people to be able to fully read them at their will, because that's also basically publishing your book for free. So just understand in advance what your goals are for the novel, and then follow suit from there. But we aren't a marketing company. That's not what our job is. Our job is to put the book and sell the book to publishers. And then they have a marketing department. They even have a department for that, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's a full department in their company that's based just for marketing. So that's what that department does. Not the editor, not the person who buys the book, but they hand that over to someone else who's well more equipped to be able to market at that point.
Yeah. I'll say, I have a couple of authors who are hybrid authors, so they do some self-publishing. And like the most I'll do is like, I'll happily retweet or whatever, but that's like the extent of the marketing support you're going to get from me. Like I'll retweet, they usually have way bigger platforms than me anyway. So I'm like, yeah, maybe I have a slightly different audience, but you're not going to get, there's no marketing for self-published work. And if you've already published it, I'm not going to be sending it out to an editor. We can discuss subsidiary rights if it's doing decently and it's self-publishing, but that's a whole different conversation.
Exactly. I think it's really important to note what Anne said is don't be posting it like for free on places if you really want to do traditional publishing, because that's technically published and they can find it and be like, yo, you lied to me. Mm-hmm. But it is definitely like agents don't mind if you're a hybrid author. Like we don't care about that. Like do you go for it. But yeah, if it's self-published, it's not worth the time we're going to be spending on it. So agents are often not going to be doing that for you at all. No, I like to retweet things for clients, but how can an agent help with backlist, especially if you're kind of trying to change your brand and moving forward? And I'm assuming this means for an agent who's either been with you through all of those, or you got a new agent and you have older stuff. And I'm not quite sure if the question means like, how do you handle me changing up things? And how do you keep selling my backlist? It's interesting, but I feel like agents don't focus a ton on author's backlist because editors should be handling a lot of that stuff.
Yeah,
we can help posts and stuff, but
yeah, I mean, if it's like backlist on stuff that's already published, like I don't like if you're changing your brand and you want to pivot, like I'm happy to help talk that through, but I'm not going to, those things have already sold. That's not really, and it either I sold it or some other agency did. If another agency did, that's the other agency's like thing. I'm not going to pick up the slack because I'm not getting paid for that. The other agency is like, they still have a fiduciary duty to that client for that project. And so, it's one of those weird things. If it's just like, oh, I have a lot of manuscripts written and I want you to look at that, I will look at, right? Especially if it hasn't been submitted or published. And then if you're not a published author, then obviously if you want to pivot, as long as you're doing something that I can handle, then certainly let's talk. But everything about this question just involves a lot of conversation, I think, to figure out.
A lot of conversations and a lot of communication back and forth.
Yeah.
And do you have more?
I have nothing. I have nothing to add to that.
The only thing I can see it really being focused in on is maybe if an author had it published with a house and a press or something, and they went bankrupt and they closed or something like that, and then your rights revert. Maybe it's a conversation you'll have to have with your agent. I could see it there maybe, but all in all, agents are usually focusing on the future. We're focused on moving you and your career forward.
I also think that even if if you did have those rights reversions, it's still really hard to sell a project, even if it was traditionally published, by a smaller press or whatever. Unless you had amazing sales numbers, and there's maybe 2 or 3 publishers that would even consider that.
Yeah. It's difficult if it's already been out there.
Yeah.
So there are definitely unrealistic expectations on timelines, like we were talking about before. But what are your reactions to, say, a client comes to you and says, well, my friends are with this agency and they hear back from their submissions to editors in 2 weeks. So why am I waiting 2 months? And what would be your response to a client who think that's the norm?
Well, first, none of my clients would ever say that to me. So I feel like I don't have that problem.
Oh no.
Oh, she froze.
Well, I ship with each other. So, and I set really, solid expectations from the get-go with them. So I've never run into that situation. But I mean, every agency is different. Every agent's different. There are those relationships with certain agencies that they, for whatever reason, get priority, I guess. And that is something that we have to deal with. But the way we deal with that is by writing really great books and submitting those really great books. And so, I mean, is it really any better to get a no in 2 weeks than to get a no in 2 months? Or is it better to get you know what I mean? In the long run, it's the answer that we're looking for. And so all we can do is put it out there and do our best. And sometimes it's a yes, sometimes it's a no, but.
Yep. Definitely. Yeah. Ava, have you ever kind of run into this kind of being confused aspect?
I think, it's definitely, I've had clients say, be like, well, such and such had this. And then I just always remind them, you can't play the comparison game. It's just everyone's path is, everyone's on a similar path, but it's different, and it's going to have different stops and different timelines. And it doesn't mean quickness doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's just, for whatever reason, something happened quickly, but that person's either going to wait down the line. There's always some element of waiting because this is publishing. I think I've definitely been able to sell projects very quickly. And then there's projects that have wandered around editors' inboxes for a 2-year time period. And before they were even with me, were with a previous agent and had wandered around editors' inboxes, and then finally we got a deal, it happens. It can happen anytime. It's until you get that yes, and you only need one, you just don't know what's going to happen. And I think the key thing is to just have patience and don't compare, because it's just, you're not writing the same book. You're not writing your experience as a person, as an author is different from, Janie down the street's experience as a person and as an author. So it's not it's really comparing apples to oranges if you keep doing that.
Yeah. And you can't assume where the editor is in their list. Like somebody could be at the top of their email chain, or they can only be wanting to read middle grade this week or something like that. So yes, your friend can get an answer faster, but it could also just mean the editor was in a mood to read that genre or found it in their inbox sooner. Or again, like Anne said, had a relationship with the agent, so got back to them faster. There's not much we can do about that. And the comparison games is really bad, which kind of leads us into the next section of what happens like when a client says, well, my friend got this publishing deal and she got this much of a royalties, or she was managed to keep the film and TV rights and we're letting them go. And like, this is bad. I don't like what you're doing. Obviously there's a conversation there, but again, you can't compare your deal to somebody else's deal because there are a ton of different factors, even if you're the same genre and age category. You can't be like, well, they got this big royalty, so we should be able to get this big royalty. I'm be like, well, that's great, but I didn't negotiate that person's deal. So they're going to turn around and just be like, you have no leverage for that.
Right. I mean, and it all like that. So even if you have something within the same category, and even if it's the same genre, there's still like, what did you use as comps, right? And like, what were your comps? What, like, because we know that they build their offers off of comps. And, if you're comping to something that was a mid-list title, then you're going to get mid-list money. Like it's just how it goes. And it does, even if you did comp to the bigger names, like to me, I think that there's something to be said too about, yes, a large advance. It's great. I love large advances. They're great. I make good money. The author makes good money, but that sets up expectations. And that's the flip side of the coin is that if you don't earn out that advance, then what happens next? Because publishers are not going to continue to put like good money after bad, right? Like they're not going to keep giving you those big advances if you don't earn out, if the buzz and the book isn't great. And yeah, certainly the publisher bears responsibility on that because they often don't do very good jobs marketing books, but sometimes, but usually when they spend the money, they do. So, it's like, there's so many levers to pull. And I just think that just comparing those like big headline numbers isn't the best way to look at it. Like I recently negotiated a deal where we actually went down on the advance to retain some of the subsidiary rights. And one of the things I said to the author was like, don't think about this as leaving money on the table, because you're not. Because remember that this is an advance. So you have to make that money no matter what in order to get more. And we have a better chance of making more money if we keep these other rights than if we just gave them away, and it was like $1,000 difference. So it's like, it's not big money. So I
always laugh because they're like, I'm getting all this money. And I'm like, I mean, technically you're not, you're paying them back. It's like a loan.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the sooner you earn royalties, that's the key.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love when we like basically say, okay, well, you can keep a little money if I can keep my film and TV.
Mm-hmm. But there's so many different like levers that we are negotiating when we're looking at a deal. And, I think if you just aren't trusting your agent to do right by you, that's a bigger problem. Then you are like, well, then you have to have a conversation. Like, if you don't trust your agent, then they shouldn't be the ones negotiating your deals. Like that's a bigger problem.
Exactly.
Yes, all of those things. I think it all comes down to nuance too, right? Like it's easy to compare like the building A to building B, but like how many bathrooms does building A have and how many people can it fit in there? And does it have great escape routes for, when there's a fire? And I don't know, like there's just too many things in there to be like, well, they're the same building. Well, they're not the same building, right? So it's just like every contract's different. Every publisher's different. Every contract person that you deal with is different. Every editor is different. I mean, there's just the layers and layers and layers of nuance. It's like a cake. You know, you got to kind of cut through in order to see all the different layers. And if you're just looking at the outside, then.
I love how you went with cake, because I was going to be like, publishing is an onion.
It's an onion. It's donkey.
Yeah, I was like, publishing is Shrek. Okay. And we'll go with you first on this one. Do agents sometimes have ways of like connecting authors with IP or packaging or anthologies and stuff like that? Do agents ever handle stuff like that?
I think that there are things that we can try to do. I know that there's things that I try to do. I know that I reach out to editors that I know that are working. If I know that they're working on a certain idea or project, I will reach out to them and see what they're looking for and try to put together some author packages to see if any of my, authors would be a good fit, or to see if they're if they're taking pitches, basically, samples and auditioning, I guess would be a great way to put it, for a certain projects. So I think that we can, in some ways, negotiate some of that and navigate some of that and look for those things. I think there's also times when editors have come to our agency specifically and been like, hey, we have this project that we're looking to do. Do you have any authors for it? So it kind of goes both ways. It's a two-way street. Now, do editors go out and tell every agency about those things? No. Do editors go out and tell every agent about those things? No. So, I mean, some of it is just kind of like luck of the draw. Some of it is, just making a call with the right editor at the right time and been like, oh, is that really what you're looking for? I have that right here for you. Let me send it to you. So, I mean, I think a lot of publishing is luck of timing. So we do the best we can, I think I would say, when it comes to all of those things. Are we going to see every single project, deal, whatever opportunity? No, but nobody is. And if anybody out there is claiming that they know every single one, they are lying. I'm just going to flat out say it.
Ava, do you have more to add to that?
Nope, that's pretty much it. I mean, I think it's just certainly if you hear about an opportunity that an author would be a good fit for, that's something obviously we would follow up on and see if we can secure. But very much, and it depends on how competitive it is. And there's just so many factors. But I mean, I think in general, agents are always willing to look for IP projects. It's just no guarantee that as an author, you would be selected for that.
Definitely. Okay, so the next section we're kind of going to be focusing on is projects where if it doesn't sell, is it dead forever? How do you handle a book that you feel like there's no one else to send it to? What kind of discussion do you have with the author? What can they expect in those moments? And also, what agents are open to or not open to when it comes to things like venturing into different age groups or different genres and stuff like that. Does it happen often? Are we open to it? Stuff like that. So Anne, why don't you go ahead and start?
Sure. So I think the first part of that question was what happens if a project basically is DEA? And that is always a tough thing. I know with my clients, whenever we go out with a project, we are already in our conversations about what is the next project. So I feel like we're constantly moving forward. So by the time we make the decision that project A is, there's no avenues left for project A, we're ready with project B and we can go out with project B. And so that's always kind of my goal is to bring forth the next project. So we constantly can have something going out and looking for a home. So do I have projects that have died on the submission thing? Yes. And it's sad and it makes me want to cry. But I mean, I always am thinking about them. And sometimes I'll talk to a new editor at an imprint and they'll be like, oh yeah, I really want, XYZ. And I'll be like, oh my gosh, I have that. So let me send it to you. So even my dead projects aren't ever really completely dead because they're always in the back of my mind that I'm trying to find those homes for. So I think that is that. What was the other part of the question? Because I feel like that was like a 16-part question and I only answered one of it. So
kind of like how we handle it, like what exactly our capabilities are when authors want to change up maybe the age they're writing or the genre they're writing.
I know for myself, I'm always really open to authors wanting to explore different age groups or genres. So I'm always like, let's do it. So, and I also kind of think that sometimes it makes it easier in a way if you have a project like I wrote this middle grade project and that's out on submission and now they're going to write an adult science fiction. Like I can easily sub those two things at the same time. They're not competing with each other at all. And so like, let's do it. So
yeah, because I know authors, they seem to have a very big fear of like, I'm not supposed to write in a bunch of different things. And I think that was true in the past, but with internet now and audiences have such an easy way of following authors now, I don't think that's a problem at all. And I like that you bring up the competing because like in our contracts, it has a non-compete clause saying, you know, you can't sell anything in this world or with these characters, or even sometimes it says in this genre or whatever, which is bull. We try to get that out. But for the year after publication. So you want to be sure if you're writing something and you got something published that you have something else you can lean back on. So you're not just like in limbo for a year. So I think that's like super important. And yeah, nothing that goes out is ever trashed. Like if new editors come in every day, new publishing houses open, the market turns. So like, and you can always not sell your first book and then edit it later. And then we send it out again. So, I mean, most of my clients didn't sell their first books. They sold like their second books.
Yeah. I like to call it like, instead of dead, dormant. So I like, it just goes dormant. And it's just in the like, you know, in the back of our minds. And it's something that, yeah, like if the market shifts, if the editorial, there's a lot of editorial churn all the time. Editors move, leave. And so an editor who previously passed on, I mean, it all obviously depends on how far it got in the acquisitions process, right? But if it never left that editor's desk, then I'm going to feel okay about sending it to another editor.
Yeah, never heard back.
Yeah. Exactly. Like, well, you know, I'm not a mind reader, so I don't know what the response was there. And, you know, I'll ask for forgiveness instead of permission. But I think, you know, there's definitely, you have that sort of ability to revive a project just because the future is uncertain. So we just don't know. So maybe if something didn't work in this moment, but that doesn't mean it won't ever work. And a lot of the times over the course of the submission process, you're getting feedback, you're hearing from editors, and some of the passes are just very bland and they don't say much, but you sometimes do get a sense of like, okay, well, here, I think this is what wasn't working in this manuscript. And like, let's go back and try and fix that before we go, you know, we do something else with this. But in the meantime, you've hopefully been working on this other great project, and this is what we're going to be focusing on now.
Exactly. So what about an author who you've had to talk with them about how you've sent it to as many people as you can right now? We need to take a backseat and obviously do your next work, all of that stuff. What about an author who decides, okay, I don't want this to go back out eventually. I want to self-publish it my way. What are reactions to that? Do they have those options? I feel like this is potential multiple answers to basing on their contract with the agency as well.
Yeah. So our contract basically allows authors to do that. We just have to agree. And so most of the time I just agree if that's what they want to do, if that's the route they want to take. There has been, so like I did one of my first authors and is the first author I ever parted ways with. They had written like this 7-book series. This is my fault. Like I was a baby agent. I didn't know that this was like a bad thing, but they had written this 7-book series and they weren't able to write outside of that world. And so the first book didn't sell and they were like, well, I want to self-publish the first book. And I was like, we had worked on the second book to try to like separate it out from the series, but it wasn't really working. And I was just like, you know what? I think you should take it. Well, we basically parted ways, but I was just like, you know, I think that in this specific instance, you should go ahead and self-publish. They did not enjoy the submission process at all. There were a lot of reasons to part ways, and it was like very hard. But at the end of the day, it was also like a good learning experience. But that's one of the reasons why I'm not interested in forcing people to do things. Like, that's not my role as an agent. So if they really feel strongly that they want to self-publish it and they want to go ahead and do that, like, that's fine. We'll work it out. It's pretty easy in our contract, because it's just basically like an email agreement. Like, yeah, okay, you can have the rights back to that book, and we'll work on this other stuff.
And what about you?
Very similar. So I haven't had any issues with that. I don't think we have anything in our contract that says specifically like we have any rights to, it's their work. They can do whatever they want with it. So if they choose to go and take it and self-publish it, then I'll probably buy a copy.
I liked it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. We're the same, basically. We have a by book contract instead of like we're signing the author themselves. So half the time I'm just like, well, we can just terminate the contract and you can go ahead and self-publish this, and then we'll just contract the next book. So yeah, there's usually not a huge pushback on it. You would, again, it's another conversation that you'd need to have with your agent and make sure in your agency contract that there is a way for, if you want to, you can self-publish that. Read fine print. So what happens we talked about marketing just a bit, and I did want to touch on it again, about marketing for writers, because whether like when you're published and your client has their book that's going to be published, do agencies have their own marketing team? Are authors doing a ton of the legwork? Do agents help brainstorm options? Like, what, Anne, do you feel like is an agent's real role with marketing?
I mean, I think our real role is we don't market. That's the real role. But I, as an author myself, right, like I've done that. I've been there, done that. I will have conversations with my authors about what I think could or could not work, or what, they want to do, and talk about like if they want to do a pre-order campaign or not, and this and that. So I will talk some marketing with them, but it's all under the assumptions that, these are things that they need to want to do, right? So if it's something they feel very strongly about. I am also a very big proponent of, if you hate something, you shouldn't do it. So like if you hate Instagram, for example, then you probably just shouldn't be on Instagram. Like, you're not going to create content that people are going to want to look at if you even hate it yourself. So it's just, I'll have like the conversations, right? We have the conversations, we can try to figure things out. Will those things really move the needle when it comes down to it? No, most likely not. But if it's something that the author wants to do and they think it's fun, and like how to best serve those things, like absolutely have those conversations. Absolutely. So, but our role, we're not marketing. Like, we're not a marketing agency. We're a literary agency, so we can't really do much there for you.
Yeah, I think there's some larger agencies that do have the marketing departments, but
not many.
Not many, and I think that those, those are areas that are, start to get a little hazy in terms of like fees and red flags that you might want to be looking out for, because what's the actual purpose of those offerings. But, in terms of like, obviously I'll review marketing plans from a publisher. We have like, when I sign a client, we have a publicity guide that we provide to every client who signs. And it just has like best practices, but none of it is, you have to do this and this and this. It's all very like, here are some ideas. Like, if you want to talk about any of these ideas, I'm happy to give you advice. And if, when a book is due to come out or whatever, obviously, we have an agency Instagram account, and I have an Instagram account. We do our best to like cross promote and, get the image of the book out there, and just, but it's like, it's really with the publisher. They're the ones who have the marketing and sales team. They're the ones who really actually need to be selling this book to the customer, who is not the reader, is actually the bookstore. And so, it's great to have, the do our best to like do that, like what's it, word of mouth type stuff, but true marketing, that's not really under our umbrella.
Exactly. We're not scheduling things for you. We're not reaching out to reviewers or anything like that. I'll have conversations with my clients and we'll brainstorm, or we'll like give some advice. And then I pretty quickly go, okay, now take these ideas and email them to your publicist. Because they'll tell you if they're already doing something like that, if they can set it up for you. So you're not just doing this all alone. And you can give them ideas. Be like, we're looking to do book signings. Here's the name of the library in my hometown or where I live. Can we put this person on the list? It's better to try to talk to your publicist and marketing team and do that, because an agent's not going to have control. An agent's just going to do what you're going to do and email your publicist. And I think it needs to be, you need to find the agent that can work with the things you want to do. Like I offered to a graphic novelist, and they're fantastic, by the way, and they sold their book. They didn't pick me, obviously. I'm going to buy it though. But they really wanted an agent who would boost their work and not just like the published work, like all their artwork and stuff like that. They would have them featured like on the website or on their Instagram and stuff like that. And I was like, I didn't even have an Instagram at the time. Now I do. But mine is strictly business and it's strictly announcements and stuff. I do have Topher on there every now and then. But for announcements for deals and stuff, like I'm not sitting there posting my clients' artwork and stuff like that. I don't have time to keep doing that. I'll like share their stories to my stories. But I was not an agent who's going to do that. I don't market or boost your audience base like that. That's your job. That's your publisher's job. So it really depends on what you're looking for in an agent too.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're almost done. So if somebody, I love this because this question always comes up and I'm like,
I'm like, what is it?
What is this question?
On average, how long does it take for you to sell a manuscript? Like there are no numbers.
I don't think I could say like.
No, there's no numbers. Or how many titles do like the percentage of your clients get published or something like that. And I'm like, it's different every month, every year. There's no real numbers on this. Like a lot of writers seem to think agents can give you statistics, like in the Query Manager where it breaks all my queries down and it's all awesome. I can't do that for the publishing world.
Mm-hmm.
We just can't knock it down to that.
I feel like the other part of this is just such a like, I think that asking us like how quickly we can sell a book is such a, it's not like if it were dependent solely on us, it's one thing, but it's so many other factors. And it's like, I'm not sitting there on the editor's shoulder being like, here, read this. I can't, like, that's just not my job. Right. Even, and I think also the pandemic has really affected publishing and us in ways that we're still experiencing. Because the other day we were talking as an agency about doing our editorial nudges, and we started out the year, and I know like those of us who had things out on submission, we all followed up in January. And then we were like, oh, wow, it's already March. And, and you kind of like, I should follow up again. But like, you almost don't even want to. Like, it's, like, I don't want to nag or harass editors to death. I feel like at this point, sometimes it's like, they're just writing me now to get me off their backs. I don't want to be that either. So like, there's just, and I understand that like editors, I have a hard time focusing on my submissions in my TBR pile. Like I can't even imagine like an editor who has, way more submissions to get through than I do. Like it's not so cut and dried. I mean, some things you can pass on pitch, definitely. But if you're actually trying to read pages, and sometimes there's a client I signed late at the end of last year whose book I kept opening, and I'd read the first like chapter and I was like, I like this, but I can't focus on this right now. And I just like close it up and I'd be like, well, hopefully by the time I'm ready to read this, like the book is still available. But like
you don't want to give it a half-hearted, consideration. You don't want to read it when you're in a really bad mood or something like that. Like I did this with a client where I read their book because we really had to read it and get it done. And I really disliked the first read through. Like I didn't dislike the book. I just didn't like the reading. And then the second draft, I was like, oh, this is way better than I got hit with last time. Like, I don't know why it struck me in a weird way because it wasn't super revised.
Yeah.
And it shows how your mental health and your attitude can be reflected in judging stuff.
Yeah. And I just think that that's something that is underlying all of publishing right now. And particularly when it comes to editors, especially editors who are working in the fiction space. You know, things are really just slow. I think we see a lot of movement on projects where there's an option, or, you know, people, you know, it's just a harder market for debuts right now. And, you know, it's just something that we all have to like work through.
Yeah, it's difficult all around.
I think you make a good point, which is it's not up to us. Like once it leaves our box, like it's not up to us anymore. If it was up to us, we would sell it the second it leaves us, right?
Yeah.
Like it would come in with multiple offers, and there'd all be auctions, and you know, it'd be fabulous every single time. But we don't have that control. Once it's out of our hands, it's out of our hands. And so all we can do is what we do, which is, you know, we do follow up when we can, but let's be fair. And to hit where Ava was talking about again, like, I don't think anyone needs to be reminded to do their job. I hate the idea that we nudge at all, because it's just like, nobody needs to be reminded that they have work sitting there waiting for them. Right. Like that is like the worst thing ever. So I mean, do I do it? Yes. But I also feel terrible every single time I hit send. It's like, I'm really sorry, but I do have to, obviously.
Yeah. We got to do right by our clients, but we don't have to like that.
Yeah.
Like I send my check-ins like every 3 months or whatever. And it just, you have to, especially because if you find out, oh, my email got lost, great.
Right.
But yeah, it's not exactly something we enjoy as part of the job. Last 2 points here. And you can start with this one. What access do agents have to publishers beyond the access authors have? So what connections can we have? I think this is pretty straightforward. So I don't know.
I mean,
yeah, I'm like, what
we can send them things that you can't send them. So
I'm like, most editors don't take unsolicited manuscripts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless we're talking about a smaller press, in which case there is no difference. But then you have to think, at least if you have an agent, even if you end up with a small press, you have someone who is actually looking out for your interests and who understands publishing contracts and can offer and advise on terms that might not be beneficial to you as an author.
Yeah, I edit contracts for people now and that are not my clients. I make that clear. And basically I will go through there and highlight it if they don't have an agent and be like, this is something that we've seen. This is something we've seen. Because without an agent, you don't know what is normal industry standard. You don't know what you're signing away. I've seen some god-awful contracts come through and authors have no idea. So honestly, that's the biggest thing for me is agents can do what authors can't, whereas we can send them to bigger publishers. We can also make those friendly, like we have connections to editors because we've sold to them before. And we know if you're getting screwed over in your contracts.
I think that's what's really important. I think that's probably where this question lies, is like, well, what can you do for me that I can't do for myself? And at the end of the day, the publishing contract is there to protect one person, the publisher. That's it. That is what it's there for. That's why they offer you the contract, is because they are protecting themselves and they are protecting their assets. So you need someone who is going to be there to advocate for you to make sure that your assets are also being protected.
And this is why usually we say, like, okay, we are not a lawyer, so it is best practice to get an entertainment lawyer to look at your contracts. But if you can't do that, we are the line of defense. And we work off of our knowledge and our mentorship and what contracts we've seen and keeping up with the business. because we are there to make sure, you're not selling away all of your rights. You're not getting stuck into an option clause or a non-compete that won't let you work for 2 years afterward. We're making sure there's not a horrible morality clause in there that could get your contract terminated for no reason. That's like, to me, that's one of the biggest things is we're there to make sure you actually get treated fairly. Final point here is basically, I want all of us can go around and we can just describe, what happens between us and our client. What is the process after they sign the contract with you? When it comes to what happens to their manuscript next, what the timelines are that we usually kind of conduct with them. Do we do book designs and stuff like that? Like, what are the do's and don'ts that we do once that contract is signed? So whoever wants to go first.
I can take it first. So generally speaking, it depends on what happened during our call. So if I had a lot of actual like larger developmental revision notes, sometimes I might write up a little bit in the offer letter and then just have the author just go ahead and start working on those revisions and then submit it to me. And then really that's what kicks off my editorial process. And we'll do whatever rounds of developmental or line editing needed before we're ready to send out. And that can take any amount of time. It could be like done as quickly as a week or can take 2 months. It's not just a like me factor. It's also, it's that client's timeline. It's my timeline in terms of like how many clients am I editing work for? Because I don't usually edit multiple projects at once. I'm a kind of like one track. So like I'll do one project and then I'll do the next. And I'm always very upfront with people where they are in my queue. So they have a sense of, okay, I let them know when I start. And then, after that, it's, you start the whole submission process, and it's somewhat collaborative, but not, like I share who I'm going to send it to. But ultimately I make the final call on where it's going to go. I write my pitch letters. I don't usually share those with authors beforehand. It's based off of stuff that the author has written usually. So it's obviously based off of the work itself, but often their query letters are used as like my initial, like
jump off point.
Yeah, my jumping off point. And then there's just like the average communication. I don't do anything with like, I'll design Canvas. I love playing in Canva. So like, when we get like, deal announcements or whatever, I provide the graphics to a lot of my authors because they appreciate it, because I have some authors like have their own Canva game that they're pretty strong in and they'll do it themselves. But I have a lot who are like, what is Canva? And
I don't do that.
It's great. But I also have a background. I have, in my publishing and writing background, I did actually take design courses and stuff. So I have a little bit of that. And it's something I enjoy. Like I just made a graphic for one of my authors got a Kirkus review. And so I just did the pull quote graphic and it was super fun. But I texted to her last night and she was like, oh, and I was like, yeah, I was procrastinating for something else. So, but that's not standard, right? That's not something that, and anything related to the book design that's the publisher's job. That's not my job. I'm always excited to get those cover designs and the book internal design pages. Like when we see the samples from the publishers, it's always super fun. And most of the time I just I'm like the second, I react second. So the author gets to react first. And I just am like, yeah, it looks great. That kind of thing.
Favorite.
Yes.
And what about you?
It's very similar, right? Like, so it's going to depend on the project. It's going to depend on like where it was at before I even like saw it and where we're going with it. And so we'll have a conversation. And by the time you sign with me, you'll know exactly what it is that, our jumping off point is and how long that's going to take. So, but it's definitely individually designed for every single author. And it's going to be different for every single author because every single project is different. So like Ava said, you know, it could be a couple weeks, it could be, you know, a quick pass through, or it could be deep revisions. So it just depends on the project. And then I don't remember any of the other question because
the process after like the contract is signed. So you do the edits and the feedback and all of that. And after that, do you, like she said, share with the sublists? Do you talk to them about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I share my sub list with the author. Sometimes authors, I have a couple authors that are very like, they know exactly what kind of editors, like they've done their research. They love these specific editors, and they, you know, would really hope that we could send it to them. And so we kind of go back and forth. At the end of the day, still I make the ultimate decision, but I'm happy to have conversations with my authors about where they want to see their book subbed. A lot of authors also have like their dream publisher house, right? And so they tell me what those are. And so we're looking to target, you know, editors from there. So I'm very open with that. If they want to see the pitch letter beforehand, I'll send it. Most of the times they don't care. So I just pitch it. They'll see it when we get, you know, their passes and stuff. It's kind of right there along with it. So when I send those along, but yeah, so it's a collaborative effort. Obviously it's their career. So I feel like they should have as much of a say in it as they want to. And some authors want a lot of say, and some authors are like, you know what, I literally have no idea what an editor is. So you just go ahead and do whatever it is that you want to do with this. And I'm like, okay, so you know, we're good.
Yeah.
So
exactly. It's all kind of based off of it. I have really similar stuff where like normally what happens is like we talked about the edits in the call. So if they sign with me, then I'll be like, all right, go do those edits. Just go do that. And then when you're done, send it back. And I usually read through it again just to double check. And if it was already pretty clean and stuff, I can't help myself. I'll just start line editing already. Because I try not to read your book more than 2-3 times. Let's be real. Not including the one when I first read it before I offered to you. So like, that's usually, and then depends how fast you write, how fast I read. I seem to always have 2 client manuscripts at one time now, which is very stressful. Yeah.
Mine's 3. Yeah.
I'm at 2 right now.
Well, I'm at 2 in a graphic novel script. So I'm like a 2.5.
Actually, no, I do have 3.
And
I'm halfway through these edits. So I'm like 2.5.
Yeah. And then of course, like my client just sent it back to me today and I'm like, I just sent it to you 2 days ago.
When they're so fast, it's like, oh, you're killing me.
Yeah. And I'm the same as you, Ava. I tell them how many are in front of them, and that I will keep them updated the month that I plan to hopefully start them. And then I'll let them know if that's going to change. I let them know when I do start. It's all about constant communication. And then, you know, when we're ready to do submission lists, I let them know I'm going to do that. I will share the names of the editors. Obviously, we don't share the emails because you never know. It's past some boundaries. And then it's a waiting game, and it's passing on the feedback to them either that day or that week. And it's pretty much most agents I've noticed do similar things like that. But yeah, it's really just all about how fast we read or how fast you write.
And I think like so much of it depends on like what kind of communication the authors want and need. And I always try to tell authors on our call is like, it's really like you have to say what you want, right? Like I have an author who does not want to see her passes at all. Like she does not want. And so for that author, I just don't forward anything. And then I'll give her a sense of where like how many editors we have left. But I don't even tell her who those editors are. Like she doesn't want to know.
Yeah. It can be stressful, like having all the information and then feeling like you have no control as it all slips through your fingers. Some people prefer not to know and just give me the good news.
Yeah. And then, you know, then I have other authors who are like, you know, they're texting me every day. How about this person? And then I'm like, oh, yeah, you're killing me a little bit. But, you know, I take every one of those suggestions seriously. I always look up the person. There's usually a reason why that person didn't qualify or wasn't on my radar. Occasionally, it's that they weren't on my radar. But most of the time, it's like there were other additional reasons, like as to why we did not submit to them.
Yeah, because we can't see everything. So I definitely tell my clients, you know, if you see an editor post that they want such and such on Twitter or that, and I don't get to see it, send it to me. That's great. give me your editors. I will tell you why or why not they work for this list or this book.
Yeah.
But we'll always consider it. You always should be asking questions. But I like that you brought up, like, they're texting me every day. I'm like, that's an expectation for agenting we need to debunk now, because definitely a lot of agenting has gotten blurry in that they're your friend too.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to be friendly with my clients, don't get me wrong, but we need to really have parameters where you don't text or call, or you can email, obviously, because we don't have to look at the email. But you don't text or call or anything like that outside of like normal work hours. And if you're in a different country, just keep in mind the work hours and stuff like that. Like, don't be texting me at 2 a.m. But it's gotten very blurry in agenting. So I do want to stress that that is not something you should be expecting from your agent, that they're going to be at all hours available.
No.
We try to be, but we have lives, we have families, we have, like, I have a second job, like, we have other things happening. So it should kind of still be treated as a business. There are business hours where I can talk to you or be of reach. And then, you know, if I'm going to bed, that is not one of them. So keep that in mind. We seem to put editors and agents through a lot of, like, you're my bud, so we're gonna like chat all the time. And I'm like, no, we're not.
Yeah, sometimes we do, though.
Sometimes we do.
Sometimes we do, though. So I feel like sometimes, like a blanket statement, this is blurry is definitely how I run my business, and pretty much all my clients know that I will respond as soon as I can. And that's the expectation. And they all know that sleeping is my hobby. And so when I go to sleep at night, I love sleeping. I go to sleep. I'm a pretty early sleeper too. Like, it's like 9 o'clock hits and I'm like, I'm out. I'm done. Today's over. Out. And it's never an issue, right? Like, there's no publishing emergencies that are happening at night anyway. But I mean, do I wake up occasionally to client texts? Absolutely. And I have no problem with that, because my phone's in the other room and it's fine. And it hasn't become a problem.
It's all about the relationship, the agent. Like, my clients know that I have a wonky schedule because my partner is off on like either Monday, Thursdays or Tuesday, Thursdays. So I'm working during the weekend. So they know they can take advantage of the weekend with me. But like, they also know that, like, I'm not really here to be answering your texts at 9 o'clock at night. So again, it's just, and don't be surprised if you have a very friendly relationship with your agent, and then one day they put up some boundaries and be like, all right, I'm going to institute this now where such and such can't happen at these turns. And it doesn't mean it's like you were a problem. It could have meant that like half of their clients were contacting them at hours that they started really starting to stress out. We're all in pandemic right now and we need to turn off more. So don't be surprised if an agent also does start setting boundaries going forward. It's not a reflection on any one thing or on a client. It's more a reflection of what the agent needs to be most productive. Yeah. But yes. So I hope this was informative. I know it ran a bit long. But I hope, we covered a lot of the concepts clearly, and we shared some insight on things that maybe now you can understand a little bit more about what an agent should be doing for you, but what they actually can be doing for you. The things they have control over, the things they don't. If you have other questions, feel free to put them in the comments. Definitely will go back and answer those, get notifications when it happens. But yeah, I hope you enjoy this. And thank you, Eva and Anne, for joining me and giving us your insight. And until next time, thank you all for showing up.
Thank you.
Thanks.